All right, we are going to talk about probably the most basic rig there is in bass fishing, the Ned Rig. But the Ned Rig has become an absolute staple in the last 5 or 6 years, especially for smallmouth fishing. And in particular, smallmouth fishing in the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, Lake St. Clair, all Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, like anybody that's smallmouth fishing these areas, they've got a Ned Rig tied on, or they should have a Ned Rig tied on. So we're going to kind of go in how I've got my Ned Rig absolutely dialed in. I've got 100% confidence in my baits, my hook, my line, my rod, my reel, and I'm going to go over all those in detail to see if that's something like you're missing a little bit here or there. 'Cause like I have the most confident in my Ned Rig. I've caught a lot of big fish on it this year, and we're going to go over everything that makes me dialed in when I'm fishing my Ned Rig. All right, so we're going to start out with just kind of a basic introduction for a Ned Rig. I'm sure you've all heard of it by now. It's nothing special. It's a jig head and a plastic. And I use 2 different style jig heads. So it's going to depend on the bottom composition of where I'm fishing. So if I'm fishing grass out on Lake St. Clair, and there's a lot of grass out there, and some of the grass is thick, some of the grass is short, some of the grass is tall, some of the grass is sparse. There's all different kinds of grass out there. But for the most part, if I'm fishing grass, I'm going to be fishing just your typical shroom style Ned Rig head. Now this is a Nedster by Northland Tackle. They come in a 3-pack. It is part of their Elite Series Jigs lineup. The size kind of depends on the wind, the current, the kind of how fast I want it to fall. And I've got several different sizes in the boat, so I can't really narrow it down to one size. If I was going to use one size, 3/16 or 1/4 ounce is probably what I'm going to use 9 times out of 10. And that head just goes through the grass really good. And it's got a 1/0 Gamakatsu hook. It's super solid. Once you've got them pegged, they ain't gonna come off. But the other hook that I'm using is a 1/0 football head jig. And this is the Northland football head finesse. And this one is a 5/16, and they make it up to 3/8 of an ounce. So if it's really windy and I need to feel the bottom, I'm going to use that 3/8 of an ounce. And I really like this hook and jig when I'm fishing around sand. Now this goes through, when you're fishing around the sand, you don't have to worry about the grass. So this will just kind of go right across the bottom real nice. If there's some rock down there, it kind of goes through the rock really good and it stands up. And especially if you're using a plastic that kind of isn't as buoyant as some of the like Elastec material, this football head jig definitely likes to stand up a little bit better than the traditional mushroom style. The mushroom style really tips over well when you're using that Elastec material, but when you're fishing just the standard plastic, it really just likes to lay flat on the bottom. So just kind of depends on what the bottom I'm fishing. Again, if it's sand, gravel, or rock, I really like this football head, the finesse football. If I'm fishing the grass, I want the mushroom style. This mushroom style just goes through the grass so much better than the football head. This football head, it gets hung up in the grass and it just doesn't come through very good. The rod that I'm using, I like a little bit slower action rod. So most of my smallmouth rods aren't extra fast, but when I'm fishing a Ned Rig, I like just a fast, a little bit more taper. There's a little bit, it doesn't have such a quick tip. So when you pull into them, the rod loads up quite a bit more, and it gives you a little bit more forgiveness if you set the hook. And I have a bad tendency to set the hook, especially on light line. So having that fast action instead of an extra fast just gives you a little bit more forgiveness. So I've got a 7'1" medium Legend Tournament Bass St. Croix. This rod is my preferred Ned Rig rod. It's long enough, it's 7'1", so I can make pretty long casts with it, and it's got enough backbone in it, whereas if I get bit on a longer cast, I can still really kind of pull into that fish and get them hooked up. And I mean, these hooks that I'm using, they're Gamakatsu, they're super sharp, so you don't really have to do a whole lot when you're setting the hook on them. And you really don't want to overdo it on your hook set. That's kind of when you have problems and you end up breaking line and pulling hooks out of fish's mouths. So just kind of a nice steady pull into them and just let the rod kind of do the work for you. You don't have to do that much. But again, 7'1", medium, fast Legend Tournament Bass by St. Croix. That is the rod that I like. So the reel that I'm using is just a 2500 series reel. And nothing special. You want something with a pretty smooth drag for after you have them hooked up. You're going to want a smooth drag for every spinning reel that you have while you're smallmouth fishing, just because they go on those runs. They like to peel off drag, and you just want to have something that's going to give you a little bit more forgiveness. With the braid that we're throwing these on, I don't really have problems casting far enough, you know, like especially with the forward facing. If you're looking at them and you're throwing a Ned Rig at them, then you only need to cast it 100 feet. I mean, we've kind of went over this in the past videos. I can do that with a 2500 series reel, no problem. They're lighter than the bigger arbor reels, and fatigue is a big thing, especially when you're fishing for 8, 10, 12, 14 hours of daylight. So I prefer the 2500 series. That's my favorite. If you like the 3000, go up to 3000. I mean, it's not really gonna make that big of a difference, but yeah, 2500 series reel, that's what I prefer. So I've got this reel loaded up with the Seaguar PEX by 8 braid, and this is a 21 pound. I've got a FG knot right there to a fluorocarbon leader, and I'm using 12-pound leader on those. With the Ned Rig, I like a 12-pound, especially if you've got Tatsu or Gold Label. That stuff's super thin already, and it just gives you a little bit more abrasion resistance. So when you're fishing this Ned Rig on the bottom around rocks or wood or gravel or seawalls where there's some zebra mussels and everything's sharp, that 12-pound can go to an 8-pound real quick. So you're definitely going to want to check it often, make sure it's not frayed up, but I really don't have any problems getting bit on 12-pound. I mean, you don't need to throw 8-pound or 10-pound on anything really. 10-pound on the drop shot, but I mean 12-pound with the Ned Rig, never had any problems. You can set the hook a little bit harder, you can horse them a little bit more, especially if you've got a good hook set on them. And it's just, especially when you're dragging it around, coming up over rocks, over wood, you definitely want a little bit more poundage, because there's no sinker on there that's going through there. It's straight like your hook, and then you've got leader that's tied to your braid. So you definitely want a little bit beefed up, especially on the Great Lakes where we've got a lot of sharp stuff, and it'll definitely help out in the long run. Let's go over the baits. So there's a few different baits that I like to throw on the Ned Rig. There's 3 different styles, I would say. So there's gonna be just your standard like turd. This is Seaman Finesse Turd. This is kind of the staple for Ned rigging. I mean, this is the OG. This is the one that's caught a boatload of fish. So this is actually my favorite color, green pumpkin goby. It works really good out here on Lake St. Clair. I've caught so many fish on it. And just that TPE material kind of gets it sticking up, straight up, and it just does an awesome job. So that OG TRD style is a great shape. And then I also throw this one, the TRD Tickler. It's just got a little bit of flanges on the end. So they just kind of, especially down there in the current, they just kind of wiggle, 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 wiggle. And just kind of gives them a little different look, especially when they've been pressured. And you don't really have to move it much to make those things wiggle. It just gives a little bit more action. I wouldn't say I have a preference on when to throw one over the other. It's just kind of one of those things. I'll try them out, and if I'm not getting bit on one, I'll throw the other one on, or if I have a couple different people in the boat, I'll put one on each rod, see which one they're biting that day. But that tickler worm is an awesome worm. The next style is actually, I throw a minnow style bait on the Ned Rig a lot, especially coming up here in the fall and like September, and those fish are really keyed in on the gizzard shad. And especially if you can get around schooling fish where they're kind of eating those gizzards and you kind of just see them blow up or whatever, sling that Ned Rig out there and that minnow just kind of falls down to the bottom, and I think those fish kind of see it falling down. They're like, oh, that one's injured, so they'll go investigate, find it sitting straight up, and just suck it up. And that's, I mean, coming up, that's a really, really good bait to have tied on your Ned Rig. Is just like a 3.5 to a 4-inch minnow style bait. And the last style bait that I'm gonna throw on a Ned Rig is just a little craw bait. This is I don't know, juvie craw maybe. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. It's by Great Lakes Finesse. They're starting to get really popular. I've caught some fish on this one. I wouldn't say it's like the greatest bait ever made, but it works. I've caught some fish on it, especially this green pumpkin color. It really, it fishes really good on a Ned Rig, you know. Both the shroom style and the football head, and it comes across that wood and stuff really good on the bottom of the lake, and definitely caught some fish on it. But you see out on St. Clair, the bass will spit up craws a ton, especially around the full moon. So if you're kind of having a little bit of trouble getting them to eat like the worm style or the minnow style, and then I'll go to the craw style on the Ned Rig, and especially around the full moon. And if you see them like spitting up those craws, that's a really good bait to put on. You can dye the pinchers orange or whatever you want. So there's a couple other ones out on the market. Turd Hog, that's a good one. That's a Z-Man one, TPE material. So definitely a few different cross style baits out there for the Ned Rig on the market. All right, just run it back one more time. We've got 7-foot 1 medium fast rod, 2500 series reel. Got 21-pound Seagar PEX 8 braid with a 12-pound either Invisex, Tatsu, Gold Label leader on there, and several different bait options, anywhere from a minnow to a TRD style to a craw. And like I said, I'm putting that on either like the Nedster head from Northland. This is just the mushroom head, or I'm gonna throw it on that finesse football style head. And it just kind of depends on the bottom on that, but just let the fish tell you what they want that day and kind of fish them both around and just dial your stuff in. So that is the setup that works the best for me. I have nothing that I want to change on that setup. It is just lights out for me. I have the utmost confidence in it. If you're looking for any of the Nedsters, check out Hook One Bait and Tackle up in Marine City. Sportsman's Direct, he's got a ton of Ned Rig stuff there at his shop too. He's got a ton of colors of TRDs. He's got lots of different Z-Man heads. So check those spots out, especially if you're in town visiting. We got a big party coming up on the lake this weekend, so it's going to be pretty busy out there. And then Labor Day is coming up pretty quick too. So get out there on the lake, throw that Ned Rig around. It's the time to catch them on it right now. And make sure, if you're looking for any of the Nedsters or the Finesse football head, check out northlandtackle.com. Alrighty guys, I have a few guide trips left in September, October. I still have quite a few days. If you're looking to get out in the fall time, that's a really good time to catch a really big fish. So if you're looking for a guided trip, LakeSt.ClairBass.com. And if you made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. And if you guys want to see anything, let me know in the comments. Like if you want to go down at my setup for any of the different techniques, just let me know and I will put one of these together. So thank you. We'll see you on the next one.